All right, can everybody still hear me? Ooh, good. To bring up the presentation. All right, so thank you everybody for coming in today, and I appreciate again all of you working with me and bearing with me as we try to iron out a couple of kinks in the technical process. Site is working on recording its presentations in a couple of different ways now and trying to offer a higher definition and a superior experience for folks who are both online attendees and also folks who are watching the recordings afterward. So this is kind of the crash test dummy for that. So thank you. And I will probably be periodically interrupting my own presentation just to check in to make sure that people can still hear me, still see me, and make sure that the technical parts are working. But I'll try to do it in such a way that it is as little disruptive as possible. So today I'm going to be talking about group thinking versus groupthink. And basically I define those terms. Groupthink is that kind of herd mentality where you get the folks together and they start working on a project, and the next thing you know, they're just kind of plowing through with a single focus, which is kind of surviving the experience. Versus group thinking, which is where the group gets together and actually improves their ideas, the purpose of group work. That's what we're aiming for. My own personal experience has been that group projects, especially online, but also face-to-face classes, often struggle. And for a long time I couldn't quite figure out why, but again and again and again on my online course evaluations, the parts that came down on what was the one thing you would change about this class or what was the least useful thing about this class was group work. They hated doing the group work, they didn't like being in groups, they felt that there was a lot of pressure in the groups, and all around it was a subpar experience for everybody involved. So that got me thinking about what I did and what I could change. And really, if anything, this is a presentation less about how to make a good group project and more about what you can learn by really interrogating what you do in the classroom. Because I continued to use this process for so long that I forgot that there were other options out there. So this is the resulting presentation. First, I had to question why I did a group project in the first place, because really there were so many things I could have done instead with that time. And in an online class, especially I teach online writing classes, we're kind of dense for information and for assignments. So really, time is at a premium. And I needed to make sure that I was doing the group presentation for the right reasons. So I started thinking about why do I do group projects in the first place? One is that I believe it enhances the richness of the product. I am a social constructivist at heart. I really believe that if you get a bunch of people in a room and they start talking about ideas, the ideas that come out of that are better than the ideas if you just had one person kind of sitting and writing stuff down. So I really wanted to keep that because I thought that they could produce superior products if they were working together. Two, it develops collaborative abilities. And this is specifically for my business writing course. One of the things I really wanted them to get out of that was the ability to work in groups in the first place. Because while they may never be called on to draw up a document collaboratively, they will probably have to work in groups on something in the business world. And I needed my students to understand the process of that, the reasons for that, and even the frustrations that go along with that. And then third, what I like to consider the least of the considerations, but probably also among the highest of the considerations, is it's on the 335 for that class. So even if I reviewed this and I thought, you know what, no, I'm just getting rid of it, can't, it's on there. They have to be able to apply the dimensions of group dynamics by completing collaborative assignments and projects. So this is what I used to do, and this may sound familiar. This is kind of the group project experience as I remembered it, and I totally fell into the trap of this is what I've always experienced, so this must be the way that it's done. I had students working together on a single project. I gave them 2 weeks of the course to finish the project. I gave them class time in my face-to-face classes. They were given class time, but often it still wasn't enough. And if you think about the meetings that you've held or that you've worked on committees, when you start getting down to it, often the time that you have together is not sufficient to complete the work. And when you're doing that to a face-to-face class, often that's the only time these students see each other. in an online class, they never see each other face to face, the odds are. So then we're kind of stuck with this nebulous limbo of how do they complete the work. And often that falls into discussion boards, which I think most people will agree are pretty much the worst when we're trying to do any sort of collaborative work. Emails, and we've probably all gotten the draft after draft after draft of the revision train that goes around and around when we're working with email. So I didn't have a good tool for that either. And also, my project was high stakes. And I consider high stakes, it's only 15% of the final average, but in contrast, there aren't many things that were worth more than that as single documents. So my students were getting together and they had a single high stakes project. Good for mimicking pressure. If I wanted to emulate pressure in the workplace, having a time-bound big project, not too bad. Sadly, that wasn't what my students were getting out of it. They were getting out of it dislike of working in groups, and for all the wrong reasons. So here's one sample assignment that I had. The students would work together to create a collaborative. I called it class sourcing because, crowdsourcing was big, and why not? Coining words is fun. Professional writing wiki. So they had to take an existing topic or identify a new topic, something we did in the course or something we didn't cover in the course, and basically develop a writing guide for that specific topic. And then it would be added to the wiki, and I was kind of compiling a class-sourced resource that future classes and current classes could use to research, check their writing, learn more about a topic, and I considered it like Wikipedia except for writing. And that sounded cool to me. I thought, wow, collaborative class wiki on writing, it's meta, they're writing about writing, and isn't that exciting? And I was really pumped about it until my students started saying, this is the worst thing we've ever done in school. And I did actually get that from a student once. So I thought to myself, it could just be me. It could just be the students. But the odds are it's something in my process that isn't working properly. So it became kind of my white whale. I went on this crusade to figure out why is this coming back every time. I mean, it was across the board. What's the one thing you would change about this course? Every semester, multiple students. The group work. Hate the group work. Stop making us work in groups. Why do we have to work in groups? And I could explain it and explain it and explain it with all those wonderful terms I used at the beginning about improving product and social constructivism, but at the end of the day, it still came back, we hate it. Stop making us do it. So I had to ask myself, what went wrong? All sorts of things, as it turns out. I asked my students, why? Why is this? This is finally, I don't know why it took me so long. I did this year after year without ever thinking to ask them why they hated it so much. I said, why isn't this working for you? Time was a big one. They felt that they just didn't have enough time to get together, especially the online students. They're taking online classes because their schedules are often atypical. Then I asked them to get together with people and work in such a way where they had 2 weeks to organize, meet their groups, organize, arrange times to be online together or arrange some sort of chain of communication, and then develop this giant project that then had a significant impact on their grade. Communication was a problem. I didn't have the right tools. I was using the discussion boards. I told them they could use emails. They used the pager function in D2L. None of it really worked. We may have time at the end. I don't know if we'll get to this or not. But the tool I ended up using, many of you who are familiar with me and my excitement over this product, I ended up using Google Hangouts for the collaborative work. And it worked out really well. I did a presentation on it earlier. This is the other side, the philosophical side of that presentation. Group dynamics and work balance were a problem as well. My groups were randomly assigned, and so it was a group of strangers with no clear leader, because I thought, well, it's a group of equals. I want it to be a group of peers. They'll get together, they'll do the work, and it's great in theory. It's not so great when they've got 2 weeks to come up with a way to contact each other and then develop this project. So the group dynamics became a problem, and the work balance as well, because there's always a student in every group who really cares about that grade. I mean, really, really cares. And there's always a student in every group, it seems, who really doesn't so much care about that grade. That often leads to inequities in in the work being done, which leads to stress. Stress on the person who cares about their grade because they feel like no one else is really holding up their end. Stress the people who are holding up their end because they feel like one person is judging them for how quote-unquote little they're doing, while somebody else is just riding along. Stress because of just the amount of work that they have to do and their inability to coordinate based on what the parameters are that I've given them. It also affected student engagement. They checked out during the group project. I lost some students over the group project. They just kind of vanished. And that was obviously very troubling. I don't want to lose students, especially over a single assignment. The quality of work was never very good. Not because my students weren't good. They developed wonderful work on their own, but I could put 4 of the best workers in the class together, and what they produced was still disjointed and difficult. And I think it's by and large because since they didn't have a truly collaborative environment to work in, they were forced to split up the work. And as we've seen with some course management systems at times, outsourcing things to the different groups leads to perhaps good functionality internally, but difficulty in being compatible across the entire suite, or the document in this case. And then assigning individual grades was very problematic, because basically in D2L it's set up if you have a group Dropbox, which is what I had, when they submit it, everybody gets the grade. And then I get emails from students. So-and-so didn't do anything. Why do I have this grade? And then do they have the same grade? And obviously I can't talk about that because of FERPA. So it put me in a difficult position. And I think we have a question face-to-face. Is that? Oh, no. Just kidding. Thank you, by the way, for coming. So that's when I finally realized, and this was from a feedback form that I gave my students. All these answers came just piling in. And I was very thankful for my students because my students were honest. They were not overly blunt. They didn't say they hated me for it. I mean, they may have hated me anyway, but they didn't hate me for the group project. And because of this student feedback, I finally realized that what I had done as a student my entire life, this is how I always had experienced group projects. And it's how I just thought group projects were done. And so I finally decided, you know what, it's not working out. It's time to change something. So I'm going to kind of split here. I did 2 different things. I'm going to talk first about my online class, and then I'll talk about my face-to-face classes in terms of what I did. But both of them ultimately come down to, again, reviewing why do I really need my students to do group work? What do I want them to get out of it at the end of the day? One was obviously listed on the 335, an understanding of group dynamics. There are other people. Whether you can take an online class and work by yourself on your own schedule, and it's all great, it's tailored to your life in many ways. But ultimately, you get out there in the workplace, and at some point, you're going to bump into somebody else. You need to be able to navigate that situation. The ability to communicate complex concepts. My students are trying to interact with each other, and I need them to be able to speak in a way that they can understand each other. Some of them have an incredibly solid grasp of the concept right away. They may have to explain it to others. Other people may have grasp of different concepts. They have to explain that to the rest of the group. So I needed them to work on their interpersonal communication skills. I also wanted them to have practice organizing and coordinating efforts with multiple participants. Setting up a meeting. It seems like it's a really simple thing, and so many of us do this constantly. In fact, at this point, you probably get multiple emails from me every day or so asking for meetings or volunteers or something. And yet, when I was first setting out to do this, it was pretty difficult to organize the logistics of this. How do we get everybody together at the same time to accomplish this goal? How do we do that as well if our tools are not up to snuff? If all we have is a discussion board that our teacher made for us? How can we really organize and coordinate our efforts most effectively? So I wanted them to really think through what would be a good practice in terms of getting this up and running. And then the social constructivist in me, I want them to develop and revise their ideas alongside other people. Some students are very willful, some faculty are very willful, some people are very willful. They have ideas, they're good ideas, they're excited about those ideas, but then they have to work with other people on those ideas. And learning to revise and adjust your ideas with the input from others is really so valuable, especially for my business students. Again, this is a business communications class. I need them to be able to communicate and change their ideas because they're going to be working in teams at some point. And in short, what ultimately I think all writing classes are trying to get at, a focus on the process instead of the product. And that's when I really realized what was going on. My initial approach was entirely product-oriented. They were graded based on the product. They were focused only on the product. The time narrowed them and limited them in creating the product. And everything I was doing was telling my students, 15% of your grade depends on this chunk of writing. And I ignored all the things that I really wanted them to get out of it. I didn't need that writing wiki at the end of the day. It wasn't something that I was desperately clinging to. What I needed was for my students to learn how to work in a group. So then I made some changes. I made multiple smaller assignments throughout the semester. Rather than one big assignment, I cut down the stakes. Instead of 15%, the first one I believe is worth like 3%. They could skip that and still be okay, but they don't. And that's where I really started to realize that this was actually a huge improvement, because I had people skipping a 15% assignment rather than working in groups, and I have people doing a 3% assignment even though they're working in groups. Part of this is because I finally started to adjust to more creative assignments, and we'll get to that in a minute. The total weight, right, of my multiple smaller assignments, so the first one's worth 3%, the second one I think is worth 5%, the third one is worth 8%, and then the last one I think is worth 10%, and it ultimately adds up to far more, is it 26%, of their grade. I'm addressing multiple learning objectives during these, as well as having them do group work. And even though the long-term grade is actually higher, they feel like there's less pressure. And part of this is because they're spread out throughout the semester. It's also because they can bomb one of these and still be okay in the class. They can end up saying, okay, you know what? I'm still good. We didn't do so well on that first one, but we learned from it, and on the next one, we'll be able to do better. And again, it puts the focus back on that process of saying, here's what we did wrong, here's how we can improve, rather than saying, oh God, the writing wiki, 15%, we got to get this done on time. Instead, they're focusing on how they're getting things done. I also put in an individual reflection, and this was actually inspired by our Zombies in Contemporary Culture course, where we had a series of narrative discussions. It was a very imaginative assignment. Students were asked to basically semi-role play through conundrums that you would face in a zombie apocalypse. What do you do if your best friend is infected? What do you do if you see a person screaming for help from a window from across the street? Do you run out and try to save them and risk getting eaten by zombies? These different things that they were testing creativity and some critical thinking and some argumentation skills. But at the end of all that, those assignments were not heavily weighted at all. What was heavily weighted was the individual reflection. What did you bring to your group? What did you do in your group? How did you communicate with your group? And again, putting that focus back on the process of collaborative work. The students in my class are called upon to account for themselves. What did they contribute? Where did they struggle? How did they address that? What could they have done better? Again, all looking back not on what grades did you get or what documents did you create, but rather, what is it that you brought to the table and what did you learn coming out of that? And again, that goes back to my whole hope of teaching them to work in groups rather than focusing on a writing wiki. It also helps act as a check against the kind of floating student. People who think that they're giving a free ride to somebody who's not doing the work, then the individual reflection comes along. That was the heaviest weighted assignment. And the students who just didn't do anything have nothing to say. And those students then, they don't get that grade. And I don't talk about this with my class, but I do get the sense that my students understand when they're doing their individual reflection that they're being evaluated on their contributions. And it's really cut down on the emails I get that say, so-and-so's not doing the work. Are they going to get the same grade we are? Which happened a lot. I spent a lot of time kind of moderating group dynamics before, whereas now students are kind of left to their own devices. It also opened up the ability to use unusual assignments. Again, in my writing class, we're kind of jammed for time. We pack a lot in over this 15 weeks. We have written assignments due every week. And so it was tough to kind of get, amidst all the required assignments, some of the exciting and interesting new ideas of what writing is. So this let me kind of work that in. And it made it actually more fun for the students because it's a challenge that they don't run into when I'm saying write a third type of letter. It's a challenge they don't run into when I say now write a memo, now write a business report. Instead I'm saying things like get together with your group, you have 140 characters to write a viable tweet about a product that you're excited about launching. What do you do? What are the conventions of using social media? How do you use it effectively? How can you fit that much message into 140 characters? And instead of having students ask, what's the minimum that they have to do, now they're capped at a maximum. It's a whole different way of thinking about writing. We also do things, we have some, let's see if I can scroll in here. The first assignment is a business write-up. I theme my assignments. They each build on the assignments before them. So the first thing they have to do is organize their groups on Google Hangouts. They have to get their group together and make contacts so that I know going forward that they're okay. Once that's done, they create a business, a fictional business, that they would like to represent during the rest of the course. They have to write up what they are, what they do, their audience, the demographics that they serve, kind of their business structure. They have to basically emulate what a real small business would have to know about itself, without the financial data and all the logistical problems and getting a loan and all that go with it. But in terms of concept, I ask them to come up with a business. So this is one example of what my students produced. Now, what's exciting about this document to me is, well, A, I think it looks really cool, but B, they just had to do it in paragraph form. And an unexpected consequence of how I change my group projects is that students are taking these things that they have to do, just they can get away with paragraph form, and they're actually making documents to represent these businesses. They're getting more creative with them when they start getting in groups. They start talking about things, and the next thing you know, somebody thinks of a cool idea. Now they're all running with it, and all of a sudden, the idea just keeps getting cooler. And this is not a unique example. This is actually pretty commonplace, where my students will take something that I've assigned them to do and really... Oops, sorry. I'm very excited as well, can you tell? And really run with it and make it their own and make it exciting in new ways. They also have ads. Let's see if I can zoom out here and get back in over there. Eventually they have to do an advertisement for a product that they're offering, and then they have to do a rhetorical analysis of that advertisement. So it's not all just kind of fun and games and fancy flyers and things like that. We are still working on these other learning objectives. They have to understand argumentation, but what this allows me to do is also expect them to understand visual argumentation rather than just argumentation in a tone letter or in an argumentative letter. Now they can start looking at, okay, what do these images mean? How do we convey our message using these pictures when we can't have just a ton of words on the page or no one will ever read it? Same is true, by the way, for lessons, as I found very early in my career when I had a little more text-heavy lessons. A big block of text, no one will read it. If you've gotten an email from me and not read it, now you know why. Big wall of text. And then here's just an example of the tweets, one of the tweets that my students came up with. Tired of the same old cafeteria food? Come get fresh, quality food for great prices. Right to you caters to your food needs. @hack, #right to you. Given 140 characters, you could probably tell me, in general, what this business does and who it serves. 140 characters. The students really took off with this. This is one of the best ones. It even has the hashtags and the mentions. I mean, they really researched what does Twitter do and how do companies leverage this. And I don't know if any of you are football fans. I know this is true for football. I also watch a lot of sci-fi because I'm a big nerd. And it's true of a lot of shows on sci-fi. They're now incorporating Twitter into the shows themselves. The second screen idea is really coming a long way just recently. And now these students are going out into a business world where this is going to happen. It may not always be Twitter. You know, the next big thing will come around, dethrone Twitter, and they'll be working with that. But what I'm trying to train my students to do is to become adaptable writers who can go out there and say, okay, we are looking at...
They're having a hard time seeing your PowerPoint on the Adobe Connect. So check out the chat box and see...
Hard time seeing the PowerPoint. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, no problem. Can I get a snack?
Yeah, you can get a snack for that. We just had Jeremiah, who's attending online and in person, and now soon to be online only.
I'm going back downstairs.
And he told me that you guys are having trouble seeing...
There you go.
Oh, Julie Grace, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, because you couldn't see your thing.
Oh, just because you couldn't see the thing? Let's see. Can you see it? Looks like screen sharing is... popped out. Oh. The add-on may have been out of date. We're working on it. Working on it.
Whoa.
Working on it. Actually, they probably can't hear me anymore. Try this again. Yep. And which one was it? I think it was the Firefox one. I'm going to have to reactivate my microphone now. Alright, can you hear me okay now? And can you see the screen now? Can you hear me? The problem is I can't see if they can see the screen while the screen's up, and if I take the screen down.
Right, let me see if I can pull my ability.
So if you are attending online, could you please type in now if you can see the screen? Bizarrely, the presentation is now missing. It's probably just scrolled up somewhere in there. And now I'll bounce back and see if they have typed in yes. Okay, they can see. Can see Prezi, but not me now. All right, let's try. And am I back? And the Prezi should be gone now.
Okay.
Because the window's minimized. Thank you, Jeremiah, for coming up. Sorry about that, everybody. I don't know what happened to the widget or whatever application, but it should be back now, and hopefully we won't run into it again. So, yes, the screen should be hatched, and in a minute I won't be able to see any of you again, but you should be able to see the Prezi. Here we go. Or the Prezi such as it is. Let's see if I can get back to it here. There we go. By the way, for those of you who couldn't see the presentation up to this point, I've even got the lights on, so my face-to-face audience is probably not able to see it as well either. But the Prezi will be available if you are interested in it. The recording probably won't help. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how the recording works out. So these are the different assignments that I had been working on, and my students really kind of ran with all of them. We already talked about this, but the lower stakes, at the end of the day, some of these assignments are worth about 1 point on a final average. Nothing that students need to get worked up about. It makes them feel safer, and then I build on the weight of those assignments as they get more comfortable working in their groups. As a side benefit, they're more likely to try something new when they look at that and say, well, what's the worst that could happen? At 15% of your grade, students aren't going to try anything too risky, because if it goes terribly, terribly wrong, they're paying for that with a full grade reduction. Instead of an A, they're looking at a B. Instead of a B, a C. Or even worse, if they're on the edge, a D. When it's worth 1 point, the odds are that's not going to make or break them. And if it is going to make or break them, they've probably got other things in the class that they could be doing to make up the difference. So now the students are saying, all right, well, what can we do with this? And they've really kind of taken off again. And it also puts the point of emphasis on how do you communicate. They're willing to try new things. In fact, I have one group right now who's really tearing around on Google Hangouts, trying recorded meetings, and they're doing all sorts of stuff because they know at the end of the day, even if something goes terribly wrong, it's not going to destroy their grade. And I'd rather have them do that now and say, okay, we're going to record this meeting, and then nothing goes right. See also this presentation. Low stakes, it's just mine. No one's going to get offended but me, and I'm okay with it. If everything goes terribly wrong on a low stakes assignment, again, they can play it safer next time, but I'd rather have them running around trying weird stuff early on when it's not worth as much. And they do. And then again, multiple assignments. And this was kind of the weirdest change for me, because I went from having one assignment that everybody hated to giving them like 4 assignments. Why not? You hate something? Here's some more of it. Doesn't really make the most logical sense. But then again, when I spread them out, it really ended up building off of each other. And after I started to theme them, the students really started to get into how do we make this work? How do we build on what we've done previously? And having the theming gives them a built-in, after the first assignment, focus. Because I can say to them, all right, assignment 1, get together with your group, build an identity for a business. Assignment 2, your business just came out with a product, come up with a tweet to announce it. And they already have the background of the business to go from. So now instead of coming together and saying, all right, we have to start from scratch, they're coming together and saying, all right, here's what we've got. How do we tie this in? It also helps me show them the relevance of each assignment because I'm referring back to things they've already done and I'm tying it back into the business environment. So I learned some lessons from this. 1, reflection and recursive methods aren't just for my students. I say this to my students all the time. Proofread, read your feedback, think about what I've said, think about how you can change for the next assignment. And then I found out that my group projects, I wasn't even doing the same thing. And I felt like a traitor to my own cause. Also, just because something's familiar, that doesn't make it pedagogically sound. That one seems really obvious, but then I start to think of what other things do I do that are just done that way because it's the way I've always done them or the way that my other teachers did them. I build a lot off of my favorite teachers from my undergrad, from my master's program, from my PhD program. The things that they did that I liked, I try to emulate those. What I often don't think about is what my teachers did that just always seemed to be done because it was that way. And as any institution that needs to adapt will know, sometimes you just can't keep doing things the way they've been done because they've always been done that way.
All right, you got a strange cross-hatching going on their screens. So I'm back up again.
Strange cross-hatching.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up right here.
Yeah, please do.
And then that way you and Seth can see whatever is going on if I go back downstairs and I just don't stay up here.
Right now you should be seeing cross-hatching. But now you shouldn't. It says it's being shared. Now you shouldn't.
It's going to take a second.
Oh, it's going to take a second to load up.
See what their comments are because they're chiming in.
Blue cross-hatching and a cursor holding onto an icon with a man and his computer.
Yeah, it's basically that gray area with like a lot of blue lines and like a little mouse icon or something. Strange.
You know what I hate? Adobe Connect. Just saying.
How long have we had it for?
As long as I've been here. This is one of the first things I was given to use as a tool.
So maybe we should poll the respondents and see if... Let's do an informal assessment and see if the respondents like Adobe Connect or not.
There is actually a survey to accompany this one.
Okay.
Assessment. This recording, by the way, is not going up anywhere. It would be 90 minutes of me saying, why isn't this working? And then 10 minutes of presentation no one can see.
Put the PowerPoint's up.
Yeah, the Prezi will be out there. And I'd be happy to talk about this with anybody, but of course, they can all hear me. So.
Computer's dreadfully slow, so just
yeah, we're still waiting on the computer that Jeremiah is using so he can tell us. Okay, I'm going to pop the thing back up. Let me know if you see it or if you still see cross-hatching. Okay, so they can see it. Now you should see cross-hatching again because I popped back in. I wonder if maybe, could it be something in the full screen? We always do full screen though. It's never been a problem before. I'll just go from here. Sorry, Seth, are you okay with a slightly smaller presentation?
Don't you dare work.
It's totally working now.
Seems to be working from this perspective.
All right, so hang on. Let me try. What about now?
That's the hash. The hash marks are coming now. The blue hash marks, cross marks.
All right, so it is definitely the full screen.
Yeah, we can see you now.
All right, we think we figured it out. I don't know why full screen is not working today, but it's certainly something to remember for the future, and perhaps time to look for a new platform. There we go. It's an adventure.
All right, So I'm going to leave Professor X up for a sec and then just log me out and don't look at my...
The ghost of Jeremiah will be attending
email.
in person.
No, I'm going to be downstairs.
Right, that's why it's the ghost of Jeremiah. The real Jeremiah will be downstairs.
I'm getting another snack.
Do it. In fact, take a couple, and, you know, if you're up for it, take a bunch and drive around to where all the other people are. Because everybody has earned snacks today, except for me and maybe this webcam. So, other lessons I learned. I apologize again. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Faculty support is vital to student success when they're working in unfamiliar territory. And that's one thing that when I first changed this over, especially when I started using Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts is something that a lot of faculty, a lot of students, a lot of people everywhere aren't used to. And so I found this new tool to help enhance their engagement and their communication, and I had them using this, and I think that the results ended up being quite excellent. But at first there was definitely that panic, and there's still sometimes that panic. I'll get a student who's not familiar with it, and they'll say, what do I do? How do I do this? Having that early intervention, getting those students right then and saying, okay, well, here's what you do, here, what's going wrong, and then working to fix the problem is absolutely vital. The same is true when they're just working in groups even without Google Hangouts. At some point, students come to me and they say, I don't know what to do about this situation. I don't know what to do about that. They're students. They're inexperienced enough in many cases. Some of them are out there working every day and in groups and doing all this stuff, but many of them are online students or face-to-face students who are just trying to make it through school successfully. And then finally, I learned, perhaps most importantly, if something's not working, ask the students why, and don't wait for the evaluations. Well, I guess since this recording isn't going anywhere, I'll be the first one to admit that I hate our class evaluations. I think they're a terrible tool. I learn almost nothing from them because the students tend to think of them in one of two ways. Students who intensely dislike the class think of it as a way to punish us. Oh, give them, Professor Bowden, I hate you, all zeros. Students who like the class think of it as a way to reward us. Oh, class, great, everything's terrific, all fives, yay. At the end of the day, what I end up with most of the time is an average in between there and no specific feedback as to why the people who gave all zeros hated the class so much and why the people who gave all fives liked the class so much. I don't find out what to keep or what to lose. So I started collecting anonymous feedback of my own. I set up a little Google Doc, which actually you'll be able to see the Google form, a version of it, at the end of this. It's a new little survey that we're working on drafting for site presentations. All it does, they fill out the information, it's completely anonymous, they send it in, and since they know that I'm the only one who's going to see it, they don't think of it as a way to reach out. Oh, who's going to be evaluating Jason? I want to make sure that they know how much I hated him. They may tell me they hate me. I mean, my students are honest, but they'll tell me why. And that's been the biggest benefit of asking for feedback. They give me what's not working and why it's not working, and often they have ideas for what to improve. And I started doing this now for all of my classes, and I actually ended up in my humanities class, my classical mythology class, at midterm I gave this little survey. What do you like, what don't you like, what suggestions do you have to improve the class? And some of the ideas that I got back were so good that I made those changes at mid-semester. I said, you're right, let's do this. And so I did it. And the student feedback was astounding. They were excited. They felt invested in their educational process. They felt that their teacher was listening to them. And they were pumped. And I was pumped because now I had a better class than I had before. Students, I think, are a valuable demographic that we don't always tap sufficiently because we end up waiting too long until the stakes are, again, too high for them to give us honest feedback. So then, that got me thinking that I didn't want this to be something about, hey, let's talk about what I do about group projects. I wanted to find out, what do other people do? Because I'm not done with this. This is, again, recursive. Right now I need to look at this and say, okay, here's what I did this time. Here's what went wrong now. So I was wondering, what do other people do to work on group projects in your classes? Do you have group projects in your classes? What do you do with those group projects? So if you have any input, feel free, our face-to-face audience, Seth. If you have any ideas, feel free to share them. If you're online, go ahead and type them into the chat box. It's extra weird when I go back because now I see myself. Although my webcam seems to be frozen.
Looking up at you, you're like, God.
It's weird, yeah. It's tilted like to the side and up. I'm like looming over this, yelling and ranting about group work. Let's see if I can expand this chat window a bit. So Tamara says, my face-to-face students always want to work in groups. We do this every week. Sometimes there's a group discussion. Other times they go to the computer lab and complete a research task as a group, and it's for a literature course. Excellent. I'm excited that they like working in groups. It is difficult online. And you're right, they spend a lot of time trying to find ways to interact with each other. Tamara, have you ever tried Google Hangouts? And no, Julia Grace, since I know Julia Grace is here, I'm not going to turn this into an advertisement for Google Hangouts entirely. But maybe a little. Yeah, too late, says Seth. It already is an advertisement. Surprise! You thought you were coming to a different presentation. It's actually just the same presentation as the Google Hangouts one. I know we will be, at least at Lancaster, offering a Google Hangouts workshop. That I will advertise. The Lancaster site is going to be offering that. Well, if we have time at the end, maybe I will. See, now I lied, Julia Grace. Maybe I will talk about Google Hangouts after all. I'm sorry, Julia Grace. I did lie to you. This is going to become an advertisement for Google Hangouts. All right. Well, we're going to try it. Now we're going to do something even more bizarre. And I'm going to switch to the Google Hangouts Prezi and see if that shares. If I can even load. Here we go. Let's see. I'm not going to redeliver this presentation, but I do have some screenshots in here that I think will potentially be useful. All right, so before I go on, oh, hey, Seth, this is a brilliant idea. This would have been so much easier if I just thought to set that up.
50 minutes, right, for us to figure it out?
Yeah, right? For you to figure it out. I was still... Seth just set it up so I can actually see what you can see without having to bounce back and forth and give you the cross-hatching all the time. So that's fantastic. So, all right, Google Hangouts is basically Google's version of Facebook in some ways. It was designed to compete with it, and it's actually become, since then, they call it a social backbone, but it's the way that the Google services are now being integrated with each other. And really, it centers around the idea of sharing information with selected groups of people. And Google calls this circles. So in Facebook, if you've been using Facebook for a while, you probably remember back far enough to the point when you shared something, it was public. That was just kind of what it did. And people were like, what if I don't want to share everything with the entire world all the time? And so Facebook put in eventually groups that you could limit. That was an idea that was already built into Google Hangouts. And it really helps with keeping my students a little more professional, because they come to Google Hangouts as a professional tool for school rather than using Facebook. I've used Facebook in the past. I've had some success with it, but often I find myself eventually getting really depressing posts like, skip Prof. Bowden's class today because it's a total waste of time, or so hungover from huge party, missed exam in Prof. Bowden's class. Things that I don't really want to necessarily hear. So Google Plus tends to keep them functioning a little more on task. What they do is they find their group members, right? We identify the group in the class so they know who's in their group. I give them a discussion board still, but they use the discussion board to find each other on Google Plus. And then they use the Hangout tool. The Hangout tool is specifically using your group circle to create a video conference. So if you've ever used Skype, the video-to-video calling, it's kind of like that, except for instead of limiting at 2, it can hold up to 10 simultaneous video feeds. So my student groups are normally 4 to 5 people, sometimes 6, so I don't run out of space in a given Hangout. My students use that to get together, and basically it's for them like meeting face-to-face. I use this in my online classes exclusively now, but I also have started using it in my face-to-face classes to kind of scaffold the time that I give them in class. Because again, when they run out of time in class, then they're right back to the Stone Age of what I was doing before, where I tell them, all right, well, there's a group discussion board if you want to use it, and now they can choose whether or not they want to go there. This allows them to re-meet up without having to travel. For online classes, that's obviously huge, because a lot of our students are all over the place in Pennsylvania, outside of the US, and now they can all work together. It still requires scheduling to get the face-to-face meetings, but that's where some of my students have really started to run with this. You can record your meetings. So if everybody in the group is okay with it, they will actually record their meeting, and then you can share your meeting with your group. So let's say so-and-so can't make it, Bob can't make it because Bob is somewhere in a different time zone, or Bob has a different meeting at that time. The group can only meet at that time, except for Bob. The group can still meet, record their meeting, and share it with Bob, and Bob can watch the meeting and get back up to speed based on what they did. They can also comment on the recording of the meeting. So they can actually keep, like in Facebook, a thread where they just keep contacting each other and keeping communication. It also allows collaborative document editing. So if they're working in a Google Doc, they can actually pull that into the Hangout and then begin working on editing it together. And they can edit it synchronously. So while so-and-so is working up at the top, somebody else can be working down below. They can be making revisions while talking to each other on the video feeds. It's actually a very powerful tool. And I've started using it for all of my committees. Any committee that I am now in charge of that's meeting online is meeting using Google Hangouts, because it's just so effective as a collaboration tool. So, and now they just added the ability to schedule these in advance. So you can actually set up a meeting time. Let's say the group's not going to be free until Thursday. Instead of having to email everybody to remind them on Wednesday or Thursday, you can set it up so it automatically invites all of them at that time. And then they'll just get the invitation. It works on computers, works on iOS devices, it works on Android devices, it works on mobile phones, although I will say I've tried the video conferencing on mobile phones. You can see the one person who's talking, or you can see yourself, but it's not quite the same experience as seeing the videos all lined up across the bottom of the screen and really feeling like you're talking with a bunch of people. But other than that, it works very, very well on all of those devices. So it's got good compatibility. And now actually Google just put out a new version that will allow it to work on Linux as well. So it already worked on Windows and Mac, and now it's going to work on Linux because it will no longer require a plugin. I don't know how many of our students use Linux, but for those folks who are big Linux fans, Google's coming for you as well. That sounds ominous. So let's see, there are some comments. Let's see. A Google intervention, Julia Grays. That's probably true. Let's see. A forum where we could share the specific group assignments. Do you mean like a persistent forum, like something that would be best in the FRC? Because we could totally look into creating something like that. I think that forum sounds like an exciting idea, and actually there's an FRC meeting this Friday, I think, so maybe I will, yes, there are many, many resources there, and actually there's a small team of dedicated folks working to improve it, expand it, and consistently revise it so it will be even better. It's got a lot of professional growth stuff. If this video weren't probably an absolute train wreck, it would also be going up there afterwards. So there's professional growth stuff, and there's assessment stuff. There are discussion boards. It's a good time. And let's see. And yes, the Hangouts are synchronous, although the threaded discussions are not synchronous. And they do... Yeah, well, on my end, it's a train wreck. You were all wonderful, but on my technical end, it was a train wreck. But yes, one of the downsides is it does require, if you want to do the video streaming, it requires a webcam or a mobile device with a camera. However, to allow students to control their sharing, sometimes you don't want to be seen on the screen. I've been staring at this frozen picture of myself on this webcam for far too long, and I really wish now I hadn't activated it. So a lot of times students don't want to be seen for various reasons. They might be shy. They might not want random people from online knowing what they look like. They may have any number of security concerns about it. They can actually turn that off, so they end up not seeing the webcam. People don't see their webcam. They can even turn off their audio if they want and only use text chat instead. So they have the option of controlling their sharing. What might my students tackle in a Google Hangout session? And can I tell you about one assignment? Sure. I'll tell you about actually the most recent assignment. My students just finished. Thank you, Seth. Thanks for coming. My students just finished their group write-up, their group business write-up. So that was the C'est Magnifique flyer that I showed you. Well, I guess if you didn't see that part. In the presentation, there's a C'est Magnifique flyer. So what they do, and this varies by group, but I'll give you an example of my all-star group right now that is just running with it in ways that I had not anticipated. First they find each other on Google+. That's the very first group assignment. Each student submits a little screenshot of their team circle so that I know that they found each other. Then once they found each other, they meet up and they have to come up with a business idea. Right? They have to come up, and it has to have, again, the name of the business, a brief product list, a background, like a history of how it came to be, a location, a demographic or populace that it's trying to serve. So they basically have to tell me what it is and what need it serves, how they're going to serve their community. And so what my students do is they use that initial discussion board to find each other. Once they found each other, they go into a Hangout that they've scheduled. And they basically meet like you would expect a group to meet in a classroom. They all pile in at Hangout time. They have their webcams up, and they talk. It's all it is a collaboration tool. Now, that's kind of the most basic use for it. This one group also is doing all of their work in Google Docs. So they actually have their documents pulled into the Hangout. So they've got the row of little video feed at the bottom where they can see each other, and in the center of the screen is this document that they can all edit. So if somebody has an idea, they can actually go in and just type it in, rather than having to email it back and forth or say, okay, well, what about this? And one person has to make the change, and then they go back and they say, okay, well, now what about this? And one person has to make the change. They can all be working on it together. And it really kind of creates more of a communal editing experience, where they actually feel empowered to change the document themselves, rather than having to rely on one person to kind of be the point person. Because the point person often ends up stuck with that. They start out as the point person, I'll make some changes while we're all talking, and then the next thing you know, they're the ones with the document, and the deadline's coming, and now they have to get to work. With a collaborative editing document, anybody can go in, once it's been shared with them, and make their changes, whether it's at the same time as somebody else or individually. So from there, they would then decide at the end if they have a document that's ready to go. Then they might be done until the next group assignment. What I've started to find is that my group members start staying in touch because they hand in the assignment and somebody will say, assignment's done and hand it in, and everybody will cheer, yay, and they'll write the comments. And then the assignment comes back and they'll discuss their grade in their circle. A lot of my students include me in their circles, because that provides me with kind of a record of what they're doing. I tell them it's optional, I don't need to be included, but a lot of them like it. And so if they're posting things, I will actually hop in sometimes and post as well, saying, all right, I think this is a great idea, or maybe this needs to take a different turn here. And then if somebody's missing, they'll record it. Or this one group that I'm talking about right now has worked on trying to record their meetings for archiving so that they can go back and basically review their notes at a later time and say, okay, here's what we said back on this day. Do we still want to do that, or do we want to do something different? And then they post it, and then they comment on it, and it kind of goes back to an ongoing process of discussion that lasts much longer than kind of the discussion board post previously. I see a bunch of people have to go, so thank you very much for coming. I will still be answering questions, so if anybody has time to stay, then I would be more than happy to continue answering questions. People can participate with audio only and no video, so they can choose whether they want people to see their video or not, and they can still talk. And no, surprisingly, Calliope, I don't field a lot of emails and phone calls about technical difficulty. Basically, I have 2 documents that I use. I've come up with 2 documents that describe with screenshots a step-by-step process to get in there and register for Google, sign up for Google+, and connect with each other. And most of them can do it just from those documents. Google's documents, the one thing about Google is that it's run by a bunch of tech heads. So they're great at making incredible products. They're sometimes not so great at making useful how-to documents because they have kind of the technical documentation. So those are what my documents handle. They say, all right, here's what you do, here's how you do it, here's a little screenshot of what you should be seeing, and I basically walk my students through the process of getting set up. From there, one of the reasons that the assignments are low stakes at the beginning is that it allows them to get in there and play. So I actually don't tell them anything beyond how to get in, how to get set up, and how to find each other and get together. Whatever they do beyond that is them playing. So some of my students will say, you know what, we tried Google+, we didn't really like it, we went back to this method. That's great. I don't make them use Google+. They can use the discussion boards, they can use the email. I only provide it as an option. But whatever their choice, they've made it because they found a process that works better for them. But actually, no. In terms of tech support, very rarely do I get anything. It's actually really, really easy to use once you get that initial part set up. You just pop in, and you can invite your entire group in one click to a Hangout, and off you go. And they just kind of pop in, and off you're up and running and editing, and it's gone really well. So I think, were there any questions that I missed? Yes, I'd be happy to share my directions for students on the FRC. There will be 2 possible problems. Oh, the poll. Thank you, Jeremiah. There will be 2 possible problems with the documents that I would share. One, they'd probably be PDFs instead of HTMLs because there's a lot of screenshots in there. 2, they've got my picture in them and specific directions on how to add me on Google+. Because that's, if my students can't find each other, but they can find me, then we can work on making contact with the others. So I'd be happy to share them as a kind of a proof of concept, and you're welcome to use them, but you'd have to crop my picture out of there and put your own in, which would be fine by me. Use them for whatever you would like. Let me see if I can add the poll here. Go fetch it. If you have to get going, actually I can just send this to everybody via email. That would probably be easiest, and that way I don't have to waste your time now. So that's what I'll do. I'll send this poll out. If you don't mind filling it out, be honest. The recording had plenty of problems, and that's what we want to know about. And we're also testing out this tool. It's a very rough draft of our assessment tool. So I'm looking for feedback on the procedure, the recording, what it was like to attend online, what you thought of the presentation, what you thought of the tech stuff. But also, feel free to email me with feedback on the tool itself. I think you should ask this question, or it's way too long, or I don't think you're measuring the right things. I'm happy to hear any and all feedback, and it will all be considered as we move forward with SITE. So thank you for being part of this bold, brave experiment, such as it went. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for coming along and for bearing with me through thick and thin. I will see you all later. Oh yes, I will. I'll turn off the spirit of Jeremiah.